one thing my dad died, I mean, the thing was like, I just said this, I looked at myself and I said, what's your excuse? What excuse do I have? I'm better than this. I'm better than to have not done it. I wanted to have done it for him to see it while alive so he could experience that. And I feel like I let him down, not because, oh, he would have told me I let him down, because he never did that. But I feel guilty for that. And I think it's a healthy guilt. I just got to try to keep day by day to do the next thing that's going to be what I'm supposed to be doing.
Welcome to AudioLife Memoirs, the podcast where we tell your story in your voice. I'm your host today, Carrie Purcell, and today I'm joined by Mark Connor, a boxer and writer who recently authored his memoir entitled It's About Time. So if you're joining us on YouTube, you can see the cover here. Within the pages of this book, you will find a collection of poems tied together through narrated stories that describe the people and situations that led to each poem. It brings emotion and insight to the narrative in a way that perhaps only poetry can do. And when the story begins, Mark explains that the title, It's About Time, refers to the common expression alluding to the inevitability that this novel would be written. It's about time it's finally happened, at least from his father's point of view, he believes. But by the end of the story, the title takes on a new meaning, that it's about time literally. The story is about time and how time is precious and fleeting and prolonged all at the same time, depending when and how you look at it. Throughout our conversation, we're going to hear about Mark's life, learning what helped to form and inform the stories he shares in his memoir and the person he is today. So Mark, I want to welcome you to the show, and feel free to edit my introduction if I got it wrong.
Well, I think that thank you. I appreciate it. So thank you very much. And no, I don't think you got anything wrong. That was a pretty good description of things.
Good. Awesome. Well, we'll dig in more. I'm going to ask you sort of starting relatively chronologically about your life. I know at points we're probably going to dip back into stories from the book, maybe even some of the poems, if that fits into what we're talking about. But I always start these conversations pretty simple, usually the same way. And I ask you to start by telling us where you were born and if there's a story behind your name.
So I'm from St. Paul, Minnesota. I was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and raised in St. Paul, Minnesota. I make a statement early in the book that I'm the product of a mixed marriage, which means my dad grew up across the street from St. Columba Catholic Church in St. Paul, Minnesota. My mom was from the Holy Rosary Parish in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I call that a mixed marriage because it's the same someone from St. Paul and someone from Minneapolis, and some people on either coast might not get that as so much of a funny joke, but people in the Midwest do, for sure. So that's where I'm from, in St. Paul, Minnesota. So the Twin Cities is a metropolitan area that it's kind of like we're all one area, but the two cities, St. Paul and Minneapolis, have very distinct identities and are very much we very much think of ourselves as from this city or from that city, but it's also we're close enough that the couple of portions where you can cross the border without actually crossing the Mississippi River, you might not realize that you're in the new city.
Gotcha. Good. So great description there. And what about your name? Is there a story behind your name, your family name? Yeah.
So on my father's mother's side, my middle name. So my dad's name was Robert or Bob. So my middle name is Robert, and I had an uncle, or it would be my great uncle who had died. That was my paternal grandmother's brother. So that was who my dad was named after. And so with both my brother and me, my mom told me that when she was pregnant with my brother, who was 13 days less than 1 year older than I am, that my mom said to my dad, what are we going to name our child? And my dad said, oh, we're going to name him David. And she said, what if it's a girl? I said, no, it's going to be a boy, and we're going to name him David. And then when she was pregnant with me, he said, "Well, we'll name him Mark." And she said, "What if it's a girl?" And he said, "No, it's going to be a boy, and we'll name him Mark." And that's it. And I don't know why my dad. I
Love
don't
it.
know why my dad chose either name. I have no idea at all. But apparently that's it. So,
But he was so sure. Yeah.
yeah. And the thing about it is that there's not a major, it's not some major symbolism for I got this name or anything like that. It wasn't.
Yeah. And so you have your brother David, and is it the two of you? Do you have other siblings? It's just you two? Okay. Awesome. And tell me a little bit about growing up. What was childhood like?
I talk about coming from the east side of St. Paul, and really, the east, there's really a small section of full east side of St. Paul that's officially called the east side, and then the other neighborhoods, like right next to it is a neighborhood, Dayton's Bluff or Mounds Park, where the Mexican American Boxing Club was, where I learned how to box. The pocket that I grew up in was a pretty quiet middle class pocket called Battle Creek. There's another section of St. Paul that's called Highland Park, which is the west end of. It's the geographically west portion of St. Paul, and I always tell people in St. If they don't really know about what Battle Creek was like, I tell them it's kind of like a tougher Highland Park, which is that it's a very mild middle class area, but people kind of had a little bit of an attitude, and so there were fights and stuff at the playgrounds and stuff like that, but nothing like a tough neighborhood where you had to worry about getting killed or anything, or gangs or anything like that. So it's pretty. St. Paul's always been a pretty stable city, and the thing about St. Paul and the difference between St. Paul and Minneapolis is that while we live in a time that's more secularized than probably it has ever been in the United States, St. Paul has got a pretty strong Catholic identity, and no child for most of the existence of St. Paul, once it was developed, no child grew up less than 1 mile away from the nearest public recreation center and the nearest Catholic church. So it's like, and the metropolitan area actually has it's more than 40% Catholic. St. Paul and Minneapolis is a full metropolitan area, but Minneapolis would have more of a Lutheran identity than and St. Paul has more of a Catholic identity. So anyways, giving you all that explanation is just to say that I went to Catholic grade school growing up. Yep. My father had gone to this school called Cretin, and I call it Bishop Cretin High School in the book because people from outside of Minnesota might not realize that we're not talking about people who are actual Cretans, but that Cretin was actually the name of a bishop in St. Paul. So that was that wasn't all, and now it merged with its sister school, so now it's called Cretin Durham. We merged with Durham Hall, but Cretin High School was all boys Catholic military high school, and then it had a rival that was originally on the campus of College of St. Thomas, or now University of St. Thomas, but it moved out to a suburb called St. Thomas Academy. The Cretin High School was more kind of the real kind of more working class Catholics that went there. And then my dad told me that he wasn't a football player, but he told me that the football coach, whenever they played St. Thomas Academy, would tell him, and they were rivals, they're arch rivals, would tell the seniors in the locker room before they went out to the field, okay, guys, this is the last time to beat the guys who are going to be your boss when you graduate. So my dad, when it came time for me and my brother, to go to junior and senior high school, he was really adamant that he was going to make sure that we went to St. Thomas Academy. And I don't know that he just wanted us to get the best possible education we could. But that was all boys. I was there for 7th and 8th grade, and then in freshman year it becomes a military high school. So I had JROTC classes and everything like that. In that respect, it was a pretty mild mannered kind of upbringing. But then I got attracted to boxing when I was 10 years old. I begged my dad to take me to the gym. He took me to the gym, and I met this great guy named Emmett Yanez, one of the 4 boxing coaches I mentioned in my in the first poem that appears in the book. And he was it was a really interesting thing because my mother's my mother's father, when he was 17 years old, and I kind of mentioned this at a certain point, right, where I mentioned I don't talk about their names or their backgrounds that much, but I mentioned very briefly my maternal grandparents and how my grandfather had been a waist gunner on a B-17 bomber in the Army Air Corps over Germany in World War II. When he was 17 years old, he had dropped out of high school, and he ended up getting into the Air Corps. He died when I was 9 years old. Pretty suddenly, he had a heart attack at age 54, and I didn't realize it until in 2016, when I was about to go to the visitation the day before the funeral of Emmett Yanez, my first boxing coach. He was Army Airborne, World War II, fought in the Battle of the Bulge, was part of the whole D-Day thing, and was a hero. He was awarded the Bronze Star. I was thinking to myself, wow, he kind of replaced my grandpa. It was like a year later. It's like, here comes a guy that comes into my life. And I was seeking this out. He was a guy that was also a combat veteran from World War II. And he taught me about bravery and about this aspect of manhood that I think is something that's really necessary. It's kind of a rite of passage for boys to go through. We all go through challenges, but there's a certain sense of real physical challenge that and difficulties that I think are really necessary as boys are growing up, that they have to go through to enter into manhood and to feel confident about themselves. And the fact that I learned how to box actually gave me it really improved my confidence in life, generally speaking.
Yeah.
And I had problems in school, and I never considered myself really a great student, but my father was always really adamant about reading. At that time, coming up the 70s and 80s, at the time there was the St. Paul Dispatch, which was the morning paper, and then the St. Paul Pioneer Press was the evening paper. Then there was the Minneapolis Star, which I think was a morning paper, and then the Minneapolis Tribune was the evening paper. So my parents got delivered to the house all 7 days a week, all 4 of those papers. And
wow.
And they always had, they'd go to the library and they'd come back with 10 books apiece. They had bookshelves and everything like that. And I didn't like to read or anything like that at all. And I had a little bit of trouble with it. And my parents, when I started boxing that Christmas, they gave me a subscription to the Ring magazine, the most famous boxing magazine in the world. And the thing is, what kind of attracted me to boxing is I kind of had an idea before that of being a bodybuilder, but then I really liked the action of boxing, and I liked I was really impressed with how in shape the guys were, and I always liked just looking at the muscles, and I kind of wanted to have muscles like that. And so what I would do is I would look at the pictures in the magazine, and and the aestheticism of just of the fight itself and what the whole atmosphere of it, and I really loved that. And so then I would read the captions underneath it, right? And so I'm reading the captions, and then I would go to the rankings from heavyweight down to junior flyweight, and they'd have the champion, and then they have the 10 contenders. I'd read them in order, and I'd start to memorize them. Before graduating high school, or maybe early in college, one time my brother looked at me and said, you were so dumb, or you're so stupid. You didn't even know it. Mom and Dad tricked you into reading by buying you the and my dad even said it one time. I think he was. I don't know if you told me he said in conversation. I don't know if he ever said it to my son. We got him a subscription to Ring magazine. People think, don't let your kid do this. He wanted to box. I let him box. I got him a subscription to Ring magazine, and that's what got him to reading. And now he's got an English degree. So
I love it. Yeah, well, I respect your parents' approach. And my next question was, what was family life like? Which I feel like you've just started to dig into. So tell us a little bit more about family life, maybe focusing on your parents.
It was, I didn't necessarily think it was ideal when I was growing up, but I would have probably had a lot of complaints about it because, I was a kid, and I saw TV or talked to other peers and stuff like that, and thought, yeah, I wish my dad was this way or that way, or my mom, whatever. But something that I always realized was coming back to home, there was always this comfort that was there. There was always this security. My dad may be gone for long periods of time, like get home really late at night and stuff like that, but he was working constantly. Like I said, we went to this St. Thomas Academy, and we weren't on financial aid, but my dad, besides being an independent insurance agent, was he worked like 17 hours a day. I mean, he would do other things. Like he did a part-time, like seasonally, he would do a little independent tax kind of thing with people that he knew, preparing taxes. He'd have nights he was calling bingo at the VFW.
Oh, that's fun.
And I was talking about one thing. He says, I was sending you guys to St. Thomas Academy. He says, I had to do whatever I could to make money for you guys. And then my mother, she had started out as a school teacher, and then she didn't really like teaching that much. And so she got a city job as she had city jobs in communications, the communications director for the civil defense. So for like the tornado warnings and stuff like that. And then she ended up transferring that to Como Zoo, our local city zoo. It's actually a city-owned zoo. She ended up becoming a grant officer for Department of Planning and Economic Development. And then when I was entering 7th grade, she had a conversation with my dad, and they decided they wanted to do something else. So she wanted to do something else, and she went to law school. And so when I was a sophomore in high school, she got her law degree. So she's doing all this kind of stuff, and taking out the loans and all that kind of thing.
Sure.
And I think back on it, and I think, in some ways you think maybe we're not getting that much attention or something like that because my parents are doing all this stuff. But my mom was there every night, and then my dad would be there too. I would miss the family dinners because I'd be at the boxing gym, but they were always there, and they were, and I think about a lot of kids, they grow up right now, like dad's always home at night. The place he sleeps is in the bedroom with mom every night. You know where he is. You're not worried about that. And I think that's such an important thing. It's an important thing that I think a lot of people don't realize the value of it. Is Pope John Paul II wrote this book, which I haven't. No, I'm going to sound really erudite when I mention this but it's that thick, and I've only read about 100 pages of it, and I set it aside about 4 years ago or 5 years ago when I tried to read it. I only got that far, but he wrote a book called Love and Responsibility, and it was written in 1958. He was Karl Wojtyla, the cardinal at the time. He wasn't Pope yet. And it talks a lot about sexuality and the nature of relations. And it's the precursor to the really famous book that he wrote that in Catholic circles is really embraced now, called Theology of the Body. But he says, first of all, he says human beings are relational in nature. And the second thing he says is, every human being, and this is from the moment of conception, every human being has a first relationship with two people. And those two people are biological mother and father. And I think about this, about you want to do someone ends up being raised by people who are not the biological mother or father. Well, the thing is, you have, even if you're separated eventually, from that moment, because you're of their DNA. I mean, you're exactly a combination of those two people. You have a relationship to them, whether that's been developed or not. Flashback to the very beginning of the answer to your question. What was life growing up? I come from a pretty intense family. We're pretty emotional. When together, we have no problem expressing ourselves. And maybe we get a little harsh, and when sometimes harsh with the language, right? And it wasn't there was no abuse or anything, but Dad was, it wasn't like you're not gonna get a spanking or stuff like that. But there was a strictness. My brother and I fought like cats and dogs, and he could beat me up until I could box, and then when he couldn't beat me up anymore, he'd attack me, and then when I could kind of get him subdued off me, or get him off me, he'd immediately the next chance attack me again. And there are times we had fights for hours, and but we loved each other, and there was this security and stability. When I think about it now, and I spent 13 and a half years working with specifically in the community with Native American Indian children.
Yes.
I was with this temporary emergency homeless shelter for kids aged 5 to 17. From all backgrounds, though, I've met people that have grown up with a less stable structure than that, and it's really an amazing thing, to think about how lucky I was to have had that childhood. So anyway, yeah, that kind of leads me into the mediocrity of what I've become since.
Oh, stop. Well, I was gonna say that was a great answer to what was family life like. Really clear picture, great description of your parents and the importance of that connection and the stability. And siblings, maybe, I don't know if it's siblings, if it's boys, if it's the age proximity, but yeah, siblings fight.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you don't love each other and
Right.
all of that. But my older brother definitely picked on me. Still does. Yeah. So there's lots of threads I want to pick up on. We're definitely going to get into boxing, but I'm going to hold myself for a minute and let's jump into school. So tell us a little bit about, you said you said a little bit that maybe you didn't think you were the best student, or initially you weren't that interested in reading. What was school like?
It was cool, man. I mean, it was, I had all the kind of anxieties that you'd have as a teenager and everything. I think St. Pascal's, or as we call it on the East Side, St. Pascal's, but St. Pascal Baylon was, just a parochial school. It's working class, middle class kind of kids, and but certainly not disadvantaged kids at all. There were a couple of nuns that still wore the habit and everything, but they were mostly, I only had a nun, Sister Dennis Neville. She was this tiny, short lady for first grade, and then it was all lay people that taught me through the sixth grade in our classes. And then after sixth grade, I went to St. Thomas Academy. So that's 13 miles away from where I grew up. And the one difference is that St. Thomas Academy it was founded to be an elite Catholic high school by Archbishop John Ireland for the purpose of educating future Catholic leaders. The kids that went to school there, they're from way over the other side of town or from farther suburbs. And so then there's this girls' school, the Convent School of Visitation, that's right down the hill from it. The one kind of thing about me is I don't think people would consider me a shy person. I'm pretty extroverted, but I was really shy about the girls. And so St. Pascal's is it's so unique that some of the girls from my class in adulthood, back late 90s even, it was maybe early 2000s, started contacting everyone and having a periodic grade school class reunion. So
cool.
So it's really interesting that I mean, how many people do you know they have class reunions from grade school? And so
No.
when I think about it, I mean, we had really. That's an example of one area in St. Paul, but we have tight communities. Because I talk in the book about my father and when he died, and his best friends from grade school on, guy that he grew up with that drove me to the airport, got me a ticket and everything, so that I could get on the plane to go down to San Francisco, where my dad was on life support. And the guy that he grew up with, across from St. Columba. He went to he was an altar boy there. So then Bob Byrne taught him and his friend Mike Byrne Latin so they could be altar boys. And then when I went in, his friend Mike Byrne went to St. Thomas Academy, and then he was the assistant director of the middle school. So then when I went to that middle school, I'm being taught by this guy who grew up with my dad, social studies. And then when I'm in high school, freshman, sophomore year, his dad, Bob Byrne, who taught them Latin, was teaching me Latin. And it just connections, those kind of connections in St. Paul exist where, people's uncles, relatives, cousins, everybody knows someone associated with someone's family. You start talking to someone you just met, you can be on a bus and start talking to someone and say, which part of town you come from. I come from the east side, and where are you from? I'm from over West 7th, and then you start talking about people and everything, what street you grow up on. And that is the difference between St. Paul and Minneapolis. You ask someone in Minneapolis, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Minneapolis. Where? Well, south. Like what? Why are you asking? But then St. Paul, what street you grew up on, and do you know this guy, know that guy? Yeah. So that's kind of the way it is.
Yeah.
I should probably give you more canned answers because I'm taking up a lot of time with these long.
I know. Well, it's up to you. I appreciate the answers because you're coloring a picture for us and helping us see some of those influences. And having read the book, I do get that sense of like people are very connected, right? So it's, you're maybe 1 degree or 2 degrees from knowing the same people, and in many cases having like quite a strong connection, right? Or that somebody who's connected to your father or your aunt knew them really, really well. We do get that sense in the book, but I think your answers are helping to bring that forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. So throughout school, so you talked a little bit about kind of groups of friends and people still keeping in touch. Were there sort of key friends or relationships or people that stood out during those years?
Probably the biggest influence on me outside of home and outside of mentorship or in the religious context of school was Emmett Yanez, my boxing coach. And then his protege, Bobby Zamora. There were some times at the gym when there were guys that were just a little bit better than I was, and maybe a couple years older, that were my weight, and I had to be sparring partners with them. And when Emmett said, I want you to spar, get in there and spar, you didn't say, well, I don't want to. It's like hard to give an excuse for it. Yeah. And I knew I had, and I'd get beat up basically. Not beat up badly where it was dangerous, but like I'm actually losing this sparring session, if you scored this fight, and I would really kind of get me down to myself, my ego and stuff like that. But then there were times I'd come home and I'd go in my room and cry, and stuff like that. But eventually, each of the guys that I had those kind of gym battles with, I eventually won them, and each of them eventually quit. And I kept going. And the thing is, one thing Emmett taught me was to face fears, and he taught me this bravery thing. I did have close friends and everything. There is the one friend I mentioned in I've got the poem My Now Departed Brother, David Reese, and he's actually the first black kid that was ever at St. Pascal's, and then he ended up junior year. He was going to Johnson High on the east side, which it could be a rough school. I found out later that he had some guys that were really, he had some problems with, and some kind of violent encounters with there, and he just had to leave that school. He ended up getting into St. Thomas Academy junior and senior year, and then I connected up with him the year after we graduated, and we hung out for a lot. And then he lost his life in a motorcycle crash in 2018. And there are people like the guy. If you look at the credits in the book, the first guy I list is Dan Flynn as my literary advisor. He's actually got a jacket quote on here.
So, It's About Time, Millions of Copies Sold for Dad is a book everyone should read. Author, poet Mark Connor bears his soul through stories and poems that will change your spirit for life. That will enhance your spirit for life.
That's a video. Dan Flynn. So he wrote the book Famous Minnesotans, Past and Present, and his younger brother is Vince Flynn, who is a well-known, very successful spy novelist. And he unfortunately died. I think it was in 2012. But I didn't know him that well, but he was my company commander my freshman year of at St. Thomas Academy, and but Dan Flynn was a freshman football coach. And I started boxing. My dad said, "Hey, I can take you to meet someone that can tell you about boxing and everything." It was on a Friday night, and I had just started football. It was fifth grade. I'd played in one football game, but people weren't showing up to class. I mean, not to practice. And so the one practice, if someone wasn't there, the coach said, if the next guy doesn't show up to practice, is off the team. And it was Friday night, and I was thinking, I'm going to go. Okay, we're going to go to this, whatever this boxing event is, and I gotta make sure we gotta get done with football practice and get home. And so I'm thinking about going. That my dad got home from work, whatever he was doing, says, "Okay, you ready to go? To this boxing event?" And I says, "Well, I got to go to football practice first." He says, "No, I'm not going to do that. I'm just too busy. Either go to football or you go to boxing. But if you don't go to boxing, I'm not going to take you to it." He said, I decided to himself, "Well, I guess I'm off the team." Okay. And I didn't tell my dad. It's okay. Well, let's go. And so I hadn't played football at all for the next 4 years. And then freshman year, like I said about, feeling kind of awkward around the girls and everything, I thought it would impress the girls over at Visitation more if I were a football player, because it's such a football dynasty school and everything.
Yeah.
And so I had started cross country, but I quit and I was playing football. And Dan Flynn, who had graduated this school about 8-10 years earlier, he was, or maybe a little less than that. He's not that old. He was the assistant freshman football coach, and I was third string linebacker and I was third string running back. But he kind of made a connection with me, and he really encouraged me a lot and thought that I was really determined and everything like that, and was always really encouraging. And then about 10 or more years ago, I saw him on social media. He would do these posts. He'd go to these different music events in the clubs around town and do live streams and stuff like that. And so I started communicating with him, and we kind of, when I ended up writing this book, he's the first guy I brought the manuscript to. And then the other guy, who won the Midwest Book Award, he's just listed as Klecko, but Danny Klecko, I mentioned a story about him in the first part of the book. He's the second guy that I gave the manuscript to give feedback on it. And so, anyway, so that's a guy who I think had a really positive influence on me, in high school at that time, my life and everything,
And he says about you that you're a valuable resource that he steals from every chance he can get.
Yeah, he always has a colorful way of explaining things. Yeah.
He also calls you an inspiration. That's awesome.
He's a pretty cool guy. Yeah, and a very good writer too. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so let's dig in. So you got an interest in boxing at 10 years old. How did that come about? It sounds like your parents or your dad just kind of supported it as soon as you said you wanted to do it. So talk to us a little bit about that. How did you discover boxing? What were you drawn to, and how did you get into it?
Well, in actuality, my mother was really upset that I wanted to box, and she and was against it. And I kept asking my dad, and I kept asking him, and finally I said, "There's got to be some place where you could take me? Yeah, I think I know someplace. I think I know a guy, and eventually got me to the Mexican American Boxing Club. So I got into it because when that first movie Rocky came out, my family didn't see it. We didn't see it. But then we went and saw Rocky 2 come in 79, come in 1980. The previous Olympics was when, Sugar Ray Leonard came out of there, Michael Spinks, Leon Spinks. Some people might not know some of these names, but those are some big names. There were a lot of real prominent guys that came out of that team. And so boxing was getting really popular on TV at the time. So I was seeing it a lot.
Yeah.
So I was really attracted to it. And I wanted to be an athlete or an actor or a rock and roll star or something like that,
Makes sense.
So it looked glorious and prestigious to me. So I just really, really wanted to do it. And I didn't get pushed around that much, but I was smaller than most of the girls when I was younger than 10 years old. And I didn't get pushed around, but if I did get pushed, if I did get into a conflict with kids, I'd fight, but I wasn't necessarily going to win. And once I started boxing, it really, it really actually it toughened me up, and I guess I was probably tough for it anyway, but it toughened me up, and it got me. I became a much better athlete at everything, just much more disciplined. I'd get up in the morning and go run, before school.
Yeah.
And I'd be at the gym every day. I loved this so much that instead of going out and riding my bike or, throwing a ball around with the other guys, I'd be at the gym. And when I was hitting the bag or whatever I was doing, in my mind, I was being the famous fighters I was watching on TV. That was my way of playing when I was a really little kid.
Yeah.
And now for a word from our sponsors. Ready to share your stories and life philosophy? Or capture those of a parent or grandparent? Or maybe a corporate package is right for you to build connection across your workforce and add value to your clients. Visit audiolife.io today to learn more. Our listeners will get 10% off using discount code GIFT10 and order number AudioLife Podcast. AudioLife, where memories find their voice.
So we were talking about boxing. You were saying, as a kid, it replaced sort of the kind of playing with a ball or some of those other activities. Initially, your mom, as you can imagine, a mother would be not keen on you getting punched in the face or punching other people.
Right.
Did she come around to it?
Yeah, she'd come to the fights and stuff like that, but she hated it. I mean, she always told me that she really had a real problem with it emotionally and everything, so I think that if you read, it's not mentioned in the book here. The book is written when she's alive, but in my bio that was sent to you, she died October 22nd of 2023, and she had told me before that she when she was going through her suffering, she told me that she really wished she would have got me to quit boxing a lot. I really wish I did,
Well, okay. So a big part of your focus, your passions, your work, and your career are boxing and writing. What were some highlights and some challenges along the way? You reference a few of these in the book as well, but whether it's from the book or outside of the book, or whichever side you want to focus on, what were some of those highlights and challenges?
I had this kind of internal pull between the two, and I had this. I think that it's something. Maybe I've inherited this. Maybe I'm. Maybe I don't know that my father, that my parents necessarily felt this way or anything, but I had this kind of internal kind of feeling that if I wasn't as an amateur doing it at the absolute top level, there wasn't going to be a justification to turn professional, because I wasn't going to make because you have to have a job when you start out, instead of and I actually internally I have this kind of self-criticism, like, well, I wasn't good enough. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't good enough isn't like there's something wrong with me because I know I'm better than this. I should be performing at a higher level. And then I kind of had this notion that I'm kind of looked down on as not being very intellectual because I'm a boxer and I've got to really kind of achieve academically. And writing was the one way that I could actually show that I had some kind of intelligence. I could tell a good story, and I can articulate myself well, and I understand. I've got a good handle on how the language is used and on vocabulary and everything,
Yeah.
and I can understand concepts. So when I went to the Olympic Training Center a couple of days after graduating high school, and I fought in the preliminary tryouts for the Pan American Games, and I lost. And I didn't have, I was going to say, like, if I could have gotten, to the semifinals, finals of the Pan American Games trials, or won the Pan American Games trials, made the Pan Am team for that year, I was going to say, okay, well, I'm not going to go to college this year. I'm going to take the year off. And I was going to be, trying to make the Olympic team in 1988. Well, I did. So then I started the first semester of college to say, okay, I'm not going to box now. And then I couldn't accept that. So the second semester I did box, and I lost a very close fight to a guy who actually went on to be. He went. If you remember, there was a TV series called The Contender, back in Tony or Anthony Pensanti, who he fought in that tournament and was on. And kind of became well known for that, and was a really successful professional boxer. And I actually fought some guys that had done pretty well. Gone on to world-class professional boxing, and I was sparring partners with a couple of guys became world champion. I always had I was kind of close to that level. When I look back at it now, even though I hadn't won a national title or something like that, or been on the USA team, going ahead, one or two international fights, which I thought you should be at that level before you turn professional. I probably should have turned professional somewhere between the age of 18 and 21. I could have gone 5 or 10 years, and who knows what I would have done. But boxing is it's a skill or a trade. When you start out as a professional, you're still learning, and you increase your competition level and your risk level as you go. And it's something that I should have just accepted that, but I didn't have a way. I couldn't articulate that approach to it to myself in my mind because I didn't have the experience yet. I was, I didn't have that understanding, and no one had explained it to me. So.
It sounds like you definitely have high expectations of yourself, maybe even could be categorized as a perfectionist, right? So it sounds like you wanted to perfect it before. That's coming through.
Well, so that's where, it's about time kind of comes, like, I'm watching my dad die, and I'm saying, I haven't gotten married, I haven't had kids, and I haven't published a book. So, can I know that I've gone on and on with a lot of these answers. Can I throw some
keep going
textual examples? Can I
keep going. Yeah, definitely.
Like, this poem, "Life's So Simple," right? So you remember that? So you read the book. So at the end of chapter 1, this poem I wrote to a really beautiful young lady that had to just kind of figure some stuff out in life, and so I was kind of walking away from me. So it goes, as if to pray, you start the day in meditation on your bicycle wheel, the separate spokes united in the center. You want me to be blunt, you say. I want to be direct, but fear I'll frighten you away. The final action is the original intention. This statement is authentically true, not just my invention. My responsibility is to you, a comfort for my rest, a respect in my behavior, helping you to be your best. You can push me away, invite me to stay, or walk with me today, but we met for a reason, to teach each other and learn. Such a fact comes not from acts, but is a grace we did not earn. Demons distract, demons lie, and demons discourage us from our destiny till we die. Friends encourage, friends assist, and friends persist with love on which we rely. Your guardian angel already talked to mine. Together they have watched us share laughter and argue to the point of crime. You know they're sent by God who really does exist and is not a tyrant or a terrorist. Rather, he is love, family, life, held in common at the core. You and I, specific spokes, united in the center, spinning round from place to place and nothing more. There were some other poems I put together qualifying for appropriate inclusion in this book. I've always held myself, of course, to the highest of standards, never believing any of these poems ready for an attempt at publication. So I never tried, which is why I so embarrassingly title the story, It's About Time.
Yeah.
Dad challenged me once, as far back, I believe, as 2012, asking me why, by the age of 40, I hadn't published at least one book. If I really was a writer, as I asserted myself to be, I should have been able to publish at least 5 novels or other books by then. I told him to lay off, that there were legitimate reasons for current incompletion, and that literary success was on its way. But that was all an excuse. The real reason was a lie in my heart that my work is going to be great. I just needed time to concentrate, which is always delayed right now for the job, or the friend in trouble, or another excuse, which justified not trying. The truth is, I was scared, so I never dared. If this book, which can fall flat in its face, is never presented to the public, I'll never know if you, the reader, recognize my talent. If it does, in fact, fall flat in its face, at least metaphorically, I fall flat on mine. However, so what? It's about time. And so, I think the next chapter, part of the next chapter, after the poem Doing It Badly, I have another kind of, a little explanation of things that gives a kind of real poignant point at the end. But that right there, that kind of answers some of the questions you're talking about. I never thought these poems ready for publication, so I never tried. I never did.
Yeah.
The real reason is I was scared, so I never dared. I mean, honest to God, truth. If someone's going to fight me, I fight them. And I'm not afraid of a fight.
Yeah.
But I tried. It has to be a fear. I tried to perfect myself so much. I fought a guy when my Achilles tendon was it didn't rip, but it was just terribly inflamed. And I fought this guy. I wasn't in shape to fight him. I fought him because I thought, this is going to be the last time I'm going to be able to make it to trying to make it to the USA National Championships, and I shouldn't have fought him because I fought with injuries before, but this guy, he dropped me, and he shouldn't have been able to, and I dropped him before, and so just different stuff like that, psychological things.
Well, so basically those reinforced your, I'm not ready, I have to perfect it, I shouldn't have, I should have performed better, I wasn't ready. Is that part of the cycle there?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
It's not that different from looking back sometimes, like Marlon Brando did in On the Waterfront, and saying, I could have been a contender.
Yeah. Despite everything you've said, despite the title, despite everything I understand, why did you publish it now? How did you do it?
How did I do it?
Yeah. How'd you get yourself to say, and again, despite everything, you really, in that poem, and there were a few, that was one of the ones that really stood out to me. At the end of it, there's a few that still stand out, where it's like these really significant moments or realizations or people that have been in your life.
Yeah.
And this was one of them. And so what's the line between There's the hesitation, there's the fear, the perfectionism, maybe a little bit of certainly high self-expectations, certainly expectations from your father as well.
Mhm.
And then somehow, even if it is about time, somehow this did come about. How did,
Yeah,
where was that line? Yeah.
I always have big plans, you know? I mean, seriously, I'm a
Yeah.
real dreamer, and I'm dreaming of big, huge things I'm gonna do all the time. I mean, I'm 55 years old, and I'm telling you, I mean, I will admit that it's possible for it not to be in God's plan for me, right? But I intend to marry someone with whom I'm going to biologically have children,
Yeah.
and that's people look at me and say, "What, are you crazy?" I mean, what makes you think that, you know? But it's I think it's pretty natural that I think that way. I
Yeah.
don't I don't know that I necessarily take that I necessarily do everything I should that's the healthiest thing in the world. But I'm not a big drinker, and I do exercise. I've been an athlete. I'm pretty healthy. I don't eat terribly, but I plan to live to be over 100 years old. Now I don't know if that's going to happen, and anything could happen the next day. You got to be careful, but and you got to. I understand. A man's got to know his limitations, as Clint Eastwood would say. But I always plan on doing things. So I plan on writing more. I have stuff I've been working on and stuff I've been trying to perfect. And the thing is, the one mentality I do have though is, I've been a boxer and I was serious about it. To really do it and to really succeed at it, you have to have time to do it. You have to be able to concentrate on it, and you have to do it consistently. And so one thing is, I have a concentration issue. I have to get a lot of stuff cleared away so I can concentrate on something and do it to the degree that I want to get it done. So there are a lot of projects that I've started that haven't been completed, and things that just am working on slowly. And where's that line? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. What was
where it is.
what pushed you over the finish line on this one? What
Well,
got
for
this
one
one out?
thing, my dad died. I mean, the thing was like, I just
Yeah.
I looked at myself and I said, what's your excuse? What excuse do I have?
Yeah.
It's like, it's ridiculous. I'm better than this. I'm better than to have not done it. And I wanted to have done it for him to see it while alive,
Of
so he
course.
could experience that. And
Yeah.
I feel like I let him down, not because, oh, he would have told me I let him down, because he never did that. But
Yeah.
I feel guilty for that, and I think it's a healthy guilt.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And
I
so
get that.
I just gotta try to keep day by day, just making the choice to do the next thing that's going to be what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Thank you for that answer. Okay. So before I move into, I've got just a couple questions, but before I move into those, I want you to speak a little bit. You certainly do in the book, but talk to us a little bit about the role of Catholicism in your life.
Seeing my dad there on life support, and then and seeing him there, and then 10 days later, he dies. I'm praying over him with my mom. There's a certain point between 2003 and 2007, I had been working on call at Anda Young, which means our home in Ojibwe. That's the Native American homeless shelter for kids where I had worked. So I
Yeah.
wasn't working there regularly, but then I kind of went back to working there regularly as their part-time weekend overnight. And then during the week, I was trying to build a personal training business. I was trying to get writing assignments. I was trying to work on fiction, and then secretly trying to train and have a few professional fights before I let it go. I used to go to these sweat lodges at the Prairie Island, Dakota reservation. In 1995, I'd grown up Catholic, and had been Catholic my whole life. And then I met this Irish American poet who's a Mississippi River barge hand worker, Kevin O'Rourke. in his 40s. I'm in my 20s, and he kind of became a friend of me. We talked a lot about literature and, and poetry and everything, and novels and so forth. And Darwin Strong, my friend, who I knew, whose wife was the executive director of Onda Young when I worked there, took me to the Sundances in Pine Ridge Reservation. I found a similarity, and for all the people out there, for like especially the really committed Catholics, and for the hardcore, fundamentalist Christians and everything. Don't worry, I'm still Krishna. Don't worry about it. And I wasn't, but just open your mind and respect what I'm saying about these comparisons.
Yeah.
There were some parallels to the two different experiences of faith. I was actually, though, I was kind of getting to the point where I was kind of starting to reject Catholicism and just embrace the Native American way. But what made me comfortable in that circle was the conceptual perception of God that was similar to Christianity, really. I mean, the point where I call it the point of merger of difference and unity.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So I had gone to these sweat lodges every Friday for a while, and I still went to mass on Sundays, but I was sometimes kind of skipping mass, stuff like that. And I couldn't go anymore because Friday nights, it's like, I came like 30 some miles away from where I live. And they'd go into the sweat lodge just before 11 o'clock, and I had to be at work at 11 o'clock, so I wasn't going. And sometimes I was missing mass. I said to myself, what am I doing? I have to have a weekly religious thing, and really, according to my religion, I'm supposed to make it to mass every Sunday. So I decided to start doing that again, and I kind of had this re-embracing of my Catholic faith at that time. What I realized was I was looking for something intensely mystical, and I didn't realize that it was already there in my Catholic faith.
Interesting.
It was already there, and so that was it. So how did it influence everything? I mean, it kept my family together. Like I have the one story about my mother's near-death experience when my parents were following the footsteps of Saint Paul between Turkey and Greece.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to I want to get people. It's about time. There's a copy so for that. You can go to boxersandwritersmagazine.com/books and you can get it, because the thing, I'd like people to read this story. So I don't want to tell the whole. I don't want to tell the whole story, but there's a story about my mother almost dying, and my dad. Our family patron saint is Saint Jude, and so there are different things that happen in that story that I'd love the listener to be able to read, because it would take too long to read it now and everything. But
it's absolutely worth reading. The whole book with that story is worth reading. And I will say as well, it's a very gratifying reading experience, because while you get to explore and feel and interpret poetry, it is very cool and reassuring to have the author tell you what it means or what it's based on or who it's about, right? Which you often don't get with poetry. So just a little hint at kind of the reader's experience as you go through it.
My whole thing was like, so that Danny Klecko had told me a few years earlier, you got to get a chapbook published, man. Get a chapbook. You got really good poetry. I'm like, yeah, but I'm trying to work on a novel. Forget the novel for now, man. Just right now, you got to get this book. And so then I'm like, oh man, I got to get a book done. Well, I'm just going to get one done. I don't care if it's just published just locally and no one else ever reads it. I'm going to get one done, because then I've got it done. Then I can work on my own stuff. And that was one of the things my dad told me, is you got to let go of stuff so you can work on the next thing and just see what happens. But I said to myself, yeah, I'm not going to just write a book of poems. I got all these poems I can put together, but I got to tell this
Yep.
story. So
Yeah.
I just injected the poems in there. And so I think it works better that way. But, and I wanted to, it's not fiction, so it's not a novel, but I wanted to
Yes.
write it kind of in that format.
Yeah.
That's how I think it's pretty cool, man. I mean, I'm glad I'm on AudioLife right now because I need to get the word out to people so they can get it. Because right now you can only get it online. There's one store in the city of St. Paul called Irish on Grand, which has it and has sold a few copies of it, but they're out of the blue. I just found out that they announced a couple of weeks ago that they're closing at the end of March, which is really sad, disconcerting. So I got to start barting around and start, hustling this thing to some stores.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know it's, you want to hold the physical copy. It's awesome to see it on a shelf or on a table. But I was able to order it to my door online, nice and easy.
Well,
So
that's great.
that's how I got it. And, the last time I did a big, right after Christmas, I went to a very, very large bookstore in Toronto near me. And I had a list of things I was looking for and, walked around, loved all the displays, went to the computer, which I was glad they still had, searched the books I wanted, and 95% of the books I wanted weren't in the store. I could order them from the store. So, maybe my taste was a little bit obscure. I won't blame the bookstore per se, but yeah, we can find it online. We just have to get the word out. So I have a couple of sort of closing questions. It doesn't mean, we can still jump around. We can still grab things out of the book as wanted or needed. But I want to ask you, do you have advice for younger generations, people listening, whoever that, whether it's a younger you, it's a younger boxer, it's a younger writer, whoever it is in your life that you might have some advice for?
Well, the younger me.
Yeah, let's start there. I like that one.
Work harder. Work harder, stay focused. Work harder, stay focused. Snap out of it. Forget her. She's not. There's no reason to be crying over. And I'm talking about, high school, man. Like, nah.
Yep.
What are you thinking about, man? Because I look at times that I came so close to some stuff. It's like, forget about it. Don't worry about it. Get back to today because, man, I worried that I had too many losses as a boxer so that it didn't look good enough as opposed to, just keep going because it didn't matter. What matters is is this fight, not the one from yesterday.
Yeah.
And in terms of younger people now, be here now, be in this moment. Don't think of don't hold on to the last moment. Don't be trying to reach towards the next one. Stay focused. Get all the stimulus away from you and concentrate on things. And there is a God and who loves you. You're worthwhile, and find someone. Find if you're to the young men especially. Find girls that you might be able to build a future with. Someone that wants to have kids, and just have kids. Get married and have kids, and don't worry about it. And the other thing I would say to young girls and young ladies. So I'll put it this way. So to younger people, find someone who will for the women out there, hold yourself to the highest moral standard, and so that the man who wants to be with you has to prove himself worthy of you, morally speaking.
Yeah.
Because that's family is everything. And this whole idea, well, I can have, there's plenty of time. Let me build all this stuff. I can have, there's not plenty of time.
Yeah, there's not.
So that's really like it is. It's about time, right? So the thing is, the only time is now. So you gotta do the serious stuff now, and just don't worry. Enjoy yourself, but don't be wasting time.
Yes.
Don't be wasting time.
Well, words of wisdom that definitely resonate with me, and I know they're going to resonate with others listening as well. I really can't take the conversation anywhere else because that's still all sitting with me. So I will just ask you my last question. Is there anything you wanted to share that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet today?
So there are two poems basically.
Let's do it.
So the one poem is the first poem of the book, and then the next one it's got a little bit of a narrative after it. So the first poem, it's called The Perfect Metaphor, written Monday, August 21st, 2017. The perfect metaphor to describe boxing is jazz. There's a rhythm to every fight. I learned that from Dennis Presley, who learned it from Rock White. A fighter has a rhythm, and the only way to beat him is for you to break it and establish your own. That's where improvisation begins. No one knows where it will lead or where it will end. Jazz is the perfect metaphor to describe boxing. Every fight has its rhythm, upon which is added improvisation. I learned that from Dennis Presley, who learned it from Rock White, who practiced collaboration with Emmett Yanez and Bobby Zamora, the two men who taught me to fight. Then the last thing I'd like to close with, this poem called Doing It Badly. Doing It Badly, written Saturday, April 21, 2018. I wrote this, I was in Reno, Nevada at the time. Anything worth doing is worth doing badly, G.K. Chesterton would say. His most redeeming quality as an Englishman was his support for Irish freedom. His second most redeeming quality was his wisdom. Anything worth doing is worth doing badly. So it was with you, even though what I decided to do drove you away. I have seemed a beast with a horn, just a losing warrior, all battle-torn, stumbling clumsily through emotional folly, not willing to admit the moment had passed and it was time to go home. You were another purpose for me, a budding young lady of beauty and need, rejecting my heart and the love I did bleed, clutching your pain as if it were greed, me standing still, alone. Maybe I was supposed to just walk away, get to bed early, greet the new day. But something in your touch, something in your sigh, something in your smile behind your dark eyes said you were worth it. Yes, it is true, both for me and for you. Anything worth doing is worth doing badly. Doing it badly is a great concept from G.K. Chesterton. It is so true. Anything worth doing is definitely worth doing badly. Think of how much God loves you. Okay, I understand we think so little of ourselves sometimes that we can't imagine people really loving us to the point of giving us everything, especially those whose relationships with their parents are really fractured. My heart grieves for those who don't have loving, sacrificing parents like I do. I understand then if you struggle believing the creator of the universe loves you with that sacrificial love. He does, though, which is why it's so worthwhile loving him. God gave you, the individual that you are, the sun you see in the morning and the moon at night. Whatever your troubles, be they a yearning for alcohol, a sexual selfishness, or anger and frustration, it's worthwhile to engage that battle for the love of God. You are so imperfect, like everyone else, that you will inevitably fail at loving God. But a perfect father accepts a child's love at the child's capacity, not his own. So go ahead. Love God badly. It's the only way you can.
Very well articulated. Perfect way to end. So I'd love to talk more, but that is the way that we should end this conversation. And I want to thank you so much for spending your time with us today, sharing your words both in print and on this podcast with us.
It's
been a pleasure.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. All the best to you. God bless. The rest of the year is great for you, and I hope that we're in touch as time goes by.
Thank you so much. The same to you, Mark. Thanks for listening to AudioLife Memoirs, the podcast where we tell your story in your voice. I hope you enjoyed our conversation today. I've been your host, Carrie Purcell, one of the founders here at AudioLife, and we could use your help getting the word out. If you like what you heard from us, please review and rate the show. Or if you know somebody who would be a perfect guest for us to interview, get in touch by emailing us at hello@audiolife.io. We appreciate you, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks with our next story.
If you like what you heard today, consider recording your own AudioLife private podcast or giving one to a loved one for a unique and memorable gift. Today, AudioLife listeners will receive 10% off using discount code GIFT10 and order number AudioLife Podcast. Also, remember to rate our show and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode.